Hey there, it's Mary here, and I have a new random facts. Now this one I'm not going to put out on a Friday because I wanted to make sure it was out in time for Halloween. Even have my Little Miss Spooky shirt on in honor of it. So let's get down to those facts. So more than 179 million Americans will celebrate Halloween this year, with 7 out of 10 consumers planning to hand out candy. Total spending in 2017 will reach $9.1 billion, with the average consumer planning to spend $86.13 on decorations, candy, costumes, and more. Yeah. I definitely have bought candy already, even though I don't plan on putting it out. Haven't really spent much else on it this year, but some years have to be thinner than others. Originally, Halloween is actually rooted in Irish history. Now, it's apparently more Irish than even St. Patrick's Day when you look at the true historical facts about the two. Halloween's origins come from a Celtic festival for the dead called Samhain. The Celts believed the ghosts of the dead roamed the earth on this holiday, so people would dress in costumes and leave treats out on their front doors to appease the roaming spirits. Granted, the Celts were not solely in Ireland when these customs started taking shape around the 1st century BC, but the Irish Celts were the ones who invented the jack-o'-lantern. This Halloween prototype was eventually disrupted and adopted by Christian missionaries into celebrations closer to what we celebrate today. Samhain means summer's end and marks the beginning of winter. Samhain is also thought to celebrate the beginning of the Celtic year, and the Celts believed that Samhain was a time when the dead could walk among the living. Now I keep saying Samhain because that's what the pronunciation guides implied. But it is not spelled that way. It is actually spelled Samhain. Yes, I signed it as well for those who might appreciate ASL. That's just American Sign Language. I know that there are other sign languages out there. The word Halloween is an abbreviated version of the phrase All Hallows Eve or All Hallows Evening. Halloween comes from an ancient pagan festival, like I said, celebrated by the Celtic people over 2,000 years ago, called Samhain. The festival took place in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and northwestern France. Like I said, not just Ireland, but there is a large hold there. So the moniker Halloween actually comes from the Catholics. Hallowmass is a 3-day Catholic holiday where saints are honored and people pray for the recently deceased. At the start of the 11th century, it was decreed by the Pope that it would last from October 31st, which is All Hallows Eve, until November 2nd. Most likely because that was when Samhain was celebrated, keep wanting to add an R, and the church was trying to convert pagans. This seemed to be a very common practice. There are a lot of holidays that were originally pagan holidays that happened at that time of year that are now traditionally Christian holidays are celebrated at the same time. It's not actually a coincidence. So All Hallows Eve then evolved into All Hallows Even, and by the 18th century was commonly referred to as Halloween. Now, immigrants from Ireland and Scotland actually brought Halloween to the United States in the 1800s. But Haitian and African immigrants brought voodoo beliefs about black cats, fire, and witchcraft. So, just like America, Halloween has really become an amalgamation of cultures, which is always wonderful to merge all the cultures together and make a new one. At the earliest Halloween celebrations, you might have worn animal skins and heads. Kind of glad this one is now fake instead of actual, but according to ancient Roman records, tribes located in today's Germany and France traditionally wore costumes of animal heads and skins to connect to the spirits of the dead. This tradition continued into modern-day celebrations of Samhain, the Celtic holiday that inspired Halloween in America. And on this day, merrymakers often dressed as evil spirits, simply by blackening their faces. I would not suggest doing that today. The leader of Samhain parades wore a white sheet and carried a wooden horse head or decorated horse skull. Young people would also celebrate by cross-dressing. Now, the history of a jack-o'-lantern. For those of you who go on social media, you've probably seen the memes and historic facts talking about how jack-o'-lanterns were actually not made out of pumpkins originally. They were made out of turnips, beets, and potatoes, so root vegetables. So the jack-o'-lantern is believed to come from an old Irish tale about a man named Stingy Jack. According to the folklore, Stingy Jack was out getting drunk with the devil when Jack convinced his drinking partner to turn himself into a coin to pay for the drinks without spending any money. Jack then put the devil, shaped like a coin, into his pocket, which also contained a silver cross that kept the devil from transforming back. Jack promised to free the devil as long as the devil wouldn't bother him for a year, and if he died, the devil could never claim his soul. But then Jack tricked the devil again later, getting him to pick a piece of fruit out of a tree and then carving a cross into the bark when the devil was in the branches. This trick bought Jack another 10 years of devil-free living. But when Jack finally died, God decided he wasn't fit for heaven. But the devil had promised to never claim his soul for hell. So Jack was sent to roam the earth with only a burning coal for light. He put the coal into a turnip as a lantern, and Stingy Jack became Jack of the Lantern, or Jack-o'-lantern. Based on this myth, Irish carved scary faces into turnips, beets, and potatoes to scare Stingy Jack or any other spirits of the night. Now, the name Jack-o'-lantern could also be derived from the night watchman who would light the street lights every evening. I kind of like the Stingy Jack story myself, but I think it's just because there's more to it. Trick-or-treating began in areas of the United Kingdom and Ireland. People went house to house, souling, which was asking for small breads called soul cakes in exchange for prayer. Adults also went door to door asking for food and drinks in exchange for a song or dance. Yeah, go ahead and do that Thriller for that, right? So, like I said, originally you had to dance for your treat, and most experts trace trick-or-treating to the European practice of mumming or guising, in which costume-wearing participants would go door to door performing choreographed dances, songs, and plays in exchange for treats. So, I know they might the sounds of it conflict a little bit, but I found conflicting results, and it could be that they're parallel histories. And they do kind of feed into each other. Now, according to Elizabeth Plex, Celebrating the Family, the tradition cropped up in America where it would often take place on Thanksgiving, not on Halloween, but Thanksgiving. And then in some early versions of trick-or-treating, men paraded door to door, and boys often followed, begging for coins. Most of these early trick-or-treaters were poor and actually needed the money, but wealthy children also joined in the fun. Door-to-door begging was mostly stopped in the 1930s, but reemerged later in the century to distract kids from pulling Halloween pranks. So we're bribing them not to prank us, apparently. I guess that's really what we kind of think of as trick-or-treating today. If you don't give me a treat, I'm going to trick you. But trick-or-treating as we know it was repopularized by cartoons. Trick-or-treating was brought to America by the Irish and became popular during the early 20th century, but died out during World War II when sugar was rationed, so obviously you can't get the candy if you don't have the sugar. After the rationing ended in 1947, children's magazine Jack and Jill, radio program The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, and the Peanuts comic strip all helped to repopularize the tradition of dressing up in costume and asking for candy from door to door. By 1952, trick-or-treating was hugely popular again. Now, I know a lot of parents are worried about poisoned candy or candy that's been harmed in some way. Now, according to the research I found, it's allegedly unfounded. I still say, let your parents check your candy before you eat it. Don't eat anything that wasn't wrapped, etc. Because you don't know what's touched it. That's just my thing. But there are only two cases known of poisoning, and both actually involved relatives. According to Live Science or Live Science, I'm not sure on which way they choose to pronounce it, in 1970, a boy died of a heroin overdose. The investigators found it on his candy, but in a twist, they later discovered the boy had accidentally consumed some of his uncle's heroin stash, and the family had sprinkled some on the candy to cover up the incident. Not cool, man. Needless to say, hopefully that uncle got help, as did the family, but I don't look at that as tainted candy. That was tainted. He got into something that he shouldn't have been, nobody should be doing, honestly, and it's very dangerous, addictive item. So that wasn't the candy itself that was tainted, though, in that one. But then in 1974, this one is much worse, and if you like learning about killers and whatnot, check out Rob Dyke. He actually has a video about this specific case on his channel. In 1974, Timothy O'Brien died after eating a pixie stick his father had laced with cyanide to collect the insurance money. That was per Smithsonian Magazine. Like I said, there are videos about that specific story in more detail. I don't know how a parent could do that to their own child, but both cases of poisoned candy did turn out to be relative situations. And like I said, the first one really wasn't poisoned candy, it was just poison, in my opinion. So, speaking of tainted candy, let's get to candy corn. I know a lot of people hate candy corn. I actually love it. My whole family seems to love it. I don't know. Mallow cream is what it's now termed as, so even those little pumpkin shapes and whatnot are mallow creams in the candy corn family. If you have extra unopened candy corn, send it our way. No, I'm just joking. But candy corn was actually invented by George Renninger, a candy maker at the Wunderle, I'm guessing that's pronunciation because it was in America, Wunderle Candy Company of Philadelphia in the 1880s. Candy corn was originally called buttercream candies and chicken feed, since back then corn was commonly used as feed for livestock. And they even had a rooster on the candy boxes. It had no association with Halloween or fall, and was sold seasonally from March to November. After World War II, advertisers began marketing it as a special Halloween treat due to its colors and ties to the fall harvest. Apparently, Halloween is actually a great day to find your soulmate. I actually met my first love, my college boyfriend, on Halloween originally, even though it took a while for us to get to being more than friends. But that was our first time we met, so maybe there's something to it. I don't know. But in some parts of Ireland, people celebrated Halloween by playing romantic fortune-telling games. According to Nicholas Rogers, Halloween from pagan ritual to party night, these games allegedly predicted who they'd marry and when. Since Halloween, like Valentine's Day, was one of the main celebrations of the year where young people could mingle with the opposite sex, it was also considered a good day to scope out a sweetheart. In America, young people, particularly girls, continued the old Irish tradition, the old Irish tradition games like bobbing for apples, tried to predict future romances according to the Oxford Encyclopedia of Food and Drink in America. So bobbing apples isn't just a fun thing to see who can actually grab an apple with just their mouth. It actually has significance for predictions. Who knew? Now, this one's a little strange, I thought. Apparently, in some areas of the states of the U.S., they referred to it for a while as Cabbage Night. This actually came from a Scottish fortune-telling game where girls used cabbage stumps to predict information about their future husbands. In the early Framingham, Massachusetts, teens skipped the fortune-telling and simply went around throwing cabbage at their neighbors' houses, according to Framingham legends and lore. This was not an isolated tradition. In late 19th century America, country boys reportedly rejoiced in throwing cabbage, corn, assorted rotten vegetables, according to Candy, A Century of Panic and Pleasure. Now, I lived at one point for 3 years in a town in Indiana, and people would throw corn at your house. They would go and steal field corn from the harvester to throw at your house. This is actually really damaging. I think the rotten vegetables is also really gross. The cabbage, I'm guessing, would also be damaging. But it's not specific to just the 19th century. I have witnessed at least corn being done in the 20th century, in the mid-80s. They used to go corning, is what they would call it in this town in Indiana. So, and it often was around Halloween. But it's also, that's when the harvest is. So, it's not completely left in the past. I wish it were, because you really are causing damage when you do things like that. That's not very nice. And think of the money that you might be causing people to spend. So symbols of Halloween are not random. As much as we would think they are, they actually have a significance. So black cats, spiders, and bats, which I think are all adorable in their own way, are all Halloween symbols because of their spooky history and ties to Wiccans. Now, Wiccans are one of the pagan religions. They're not the only one. Some people might think they are, but within paganism, there are other sects of religion in there, of the pagan religions, and Wicca is one of them. They're also known as white witches. They tend to have a lot to do with nature, and they really do believe in what you put out, you get back threefold. So they're not the kinds of witches that you read about in storybooks like Grimm's fairy tales where they're doing evil things. They're actually more likely to do something in a kind manner to help you find your way, if you're not a very nice person, you know. I've once heard a story about putting people on ice as a way to help them cool off and gather their wits about them better. But that might be another video later. So, they're all tied to Wiccans. All three were thought to be the familiars of witches in the Middle Ages and are often associated with bad luck. Bats are even further connected to Halloween by the ancient Samhain ritual of building a bonfire, which drove away insects and attracted bats. Most species of bats are insect eaters or pollinators. They're not going to feed on you. There's only one kind of bat that I know of that feeds on blood. It is not in North America, It's only in South America, and it typically feeds off the blood of livestock, not people. Sorry, Dracula. Hate to break your secret, but... And also, it's good to know that bats actually do not spread rabies as much as people think. Yes, they are potential, but it's not as likely as a raccoon or a skunk. They don't have as much interaction with other mammals. Just thought I'd share some of the little service things about Wicca and bats and all that good. So the full moon that we so much associate with Halloween images is actually extremely rare. Though it's a common trope in horror movies and Halloween decorations with the witches flying across the full moon, the next full moon on Halloween won't occur until 2020, which is 3 years away. And the most recent Halloween full moon was back in 2001, and before that it was in 1955. So it's really not common. I think it's just that it looks nice. Also, it's nice to have it lit up and whatnot. This is one that I hadn't realized, and I think it's really changed a lot lately. This has to do with shelters and adopting out black cats around Halloween. So I don't know how exact this one is now, but at the time that the article I got this from was printed, this was what they found. It's unclear whether black cats are actually sacrificed around Halloween, but various animal shelters refuse to let people adopt these cats in the lead up to the holiday. Linda Garibaldi, director of the Cat's Cradle in Morganton, North Carolina, told the Huffington Post that the shelter does not adopt black cats during the month of October because of superstition and the concern that the wrong people who might harm them might adopt them. This type of ban is starting to wane, however. When reached for comment, Emily Weiss, Vice President of Shelter Research and Development at the ASPCA, said, "Years ago, this used to be pretty common, that shelters would not adopt out cats during Halloween for fear of something horrible happening to the cats. But we don't hear too much anymore, and many shelters are actually holding a special black cat promotion around the holiday. In fact, I just saw a column on that today, and Black Cat Day, at least in the UK, I'm not sure about here, but I think it's kind of spread to everywhere, I believe is October 27th. Unfortunately, black cats and apparently black and white cats, at least in England, are the least likely to get adopted, which is very unfortunate because they're still loving, beautiful animals. So the ASPCA provided this list of a few of the black cat adoption promotions that have been tied to the holiday. As Weiss put it, most people who go to shelters to adopt a pet are not going to adopt a pet to sacrifice into a ritual. Why would you spend the money on a healthy animal, especially when there are so many strays? And hopefully people are not sacrificing them. That's horrible. Cruelty to animals is actually a sign of other underlying issues. Just gonna put that in there. So more evilness. So apparently studies have shown that Halloween makes kids act more evil. Putting costume-wearing kids into a group and introducing a clear object of desire, such as candy, has been shown to lead to de-individuation. This psychological term explains what happens when a group of maturing young minds begins to care less about the consequences of their individual actions, leading them to do things that they might not do alone. So I don't know if that would only be categorized as peer pressure, if there's another term beyond peer pressure that goes into this psychological term, but peer pressure is probably part of it. One study in particular, I had to correct my own grammar there, found that unsupervised costumed children in groups were far more likely to steal candy and money than both non-costumed kids and children not in a group. Another similar study found that masked children were significantly more likely to take more Halloween candy than they were supposed to if they believed there was no adult supervision. Oftentimes the hiding of an identity can make you feel more secure, more anonymous. I mean, it even helps in theater, but yeah, those mischief makers. Hopefully it's fairly harmless mischief, not horrible mischief. Hopefully the worst they're doing is corning houses. Or violating this law, which, wow, there is actually a $1,000 fine for using or selling silly string in Hollywood on Halloween. The prank product has been banned in Hollywood since 2004 after thousands of bored people would buy it on the streets of Hollywood from illegal vendors. Didn't know that silly string would be contraband even before the law, and vandalize the streets. The city ordinance calls for a maximum of $1,000 fine and or 6 months in jail for use, possession, sale, or distribution of silly string in Hollywood from 12:01 a.m. on October 31st to 12 p.m. on November 1st. That's a pretty long time for just a Halloween ban. No silly string for you guys, okay? But it probably is also a pollutant. I mean, does that stuff even break down? And if it does, what does it turn into? Is it just microparticles? Is it actually going to biodegrade? Crazy me thinking of this stuff. Halloween, this may or may not surprise you, is actually the second most commercial American holiday of the year. It's not Valentine's Day, it's Halloween. The candy industry in America rakes in an average of $2 billion annually thanks to Halloween. That's 90 million pounds of chocolate. Americans spend an estimated $6 billion on Halloween annually, including candy, costumes, and decorations, according to History.com. The most commercial holiday in the U.S., if you didn't already know, is Christmas. Yes, Virginia, Christmas has become very commercial. So, Halloween and the candy industry supposedly influenced the daylight savings time. Candy makers supposedly lobbied to extend daylight savings time into the beginning of November to get an extra hour of daylight so children could collect even more candy, thus forcing people to purchase more candy to meet the demand. And they wanted it so badly that during the 1985 hearings on daylight savings, they put candy pumpkins on the seat of every senator, according to NPR. Now, the candy industry disputes this account, according to the New York Times. So I don't know which way is true about the lobbying, but very interesting and kind of funny how you don't realize you're being manipulated sometimes. It's good to be aware of to open up your eyes and go, huh. Now, for the top costumes predicted, at least, of 2017. For children, the top costumes for 2017 are Action Hero. Just says Action Hero, it's kind of generic on that. The next one was a tie between a Batman character and princess. Then number 3 was an animal such as a cat, dog, lion, monkey, etc., etc. Number 4 is Spider-Man. And number 5 is a Star Wars character. Lots of choices there. I think the superhero kind of encompassed a couple of those other ones, but then again, with the Batman characters, it could have been a villain too, you never know. The top adult costumes for 2017 are Witch, a Batman character, so that's Batman, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Joker, etc. An animal, such as a cat, dog, horse. The thing with animals, hopefully you can actually do that. That should be a pretty safe one, unless you kind of go crazy with it, for not offending someone. Next one is Pirate. And then number 5 for adult costumes is a Marvel superhero such as Spider-Man, Captain America. That one does not include Superman and Batman. Those are DC. And then the top pet costumes for 2017 are Pumpkin, Hot Dog. The next one is a tie between dog, lion, and pirate. Then a bumblebee or a devil. Which, as much as we love our pets, we all know that sometimes they can be a little devil. But we love them anyway. So that was just a really quick fun facts about Halloween. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll all be safe. Watch out for the cars. Try to make sure you're lit up enough to be seen by cars if you're walking out on the streets at all, and carry a flashlight. Be safe. Be kind to each other. No throwing vegetables at people's houses. And have a great day.